I knew moving to Maple Grove would come with its share of neighborhood politics, but nothing prepared me for her. Hoa Tran. Or as most neighbors called her, Karen. She wasn't just the face of the HOA, she was the HOA. And God help you if your grass grew 1 inch over regulation height. I first met her the day we moved in. She didn't bring cookies. She brought a warning notice about our recycling bin being visible from the street. That was her hello. Her smile was polite, her eyes not so much. She didn't just enforce rules. She weaponized them. Mailboxes 1 shade off regulation gray? $50 fine. American flag hung at the wrong angle? Warning. Kids' bikes left on the lawn? HOA citation by morning. It would have been laughable if she didn't hold so much actual power. I joined the HOA board hoping to fix things. I believed in structure, not tyranny. And for a while, I thought I could work with her. That was my first mistake. It all spiraled when I asked to review the HOA's yearly budget. Things didn't add up. Thousands spent on community beautification, yet no new benches, no updated playground, no trail maintenance. But her rose garden? Magazine-worthy. Her driveway? Freshly sealed. At the next board meeting, I brought it up, carefully. I just want transparency, I said. She smiled like a shark. Are you accusing me of something? She asked, loud enough for the room to freeze. 1 week later, a letter arrived. Due to inappropriate conduct and breach of trust, your board position has been terminated effective immediately. No vote. No chance to respond. Just gone. I was furious. But I didn't yell. I started digging. Turns out, this wasn't her first HOA. In 2 previous towns, there were similar whispers: abuse of power, shady finances, personal grudges disguised as policy enforcement. Nothing ever stuck. She always moved. Reinvented herself. Until now. Because this time I had proof. Screenshots. Testimonies. Old board members from her last town who remembered her very well. She thought she'd buried her past. But I'm not just anyone. And she just made her last mistake. After getting kicked off the HOA board, I could have walked away. Let it go. Pretend none of it mattered. But every time I saw her smug little wave while walking her dog past my house, I remembered how fast she'd turned the board against me. How easily she'd rewritten the story, painting herself as the victim of hostile questioning. No. I wasn't done. I filed a formal request for access to the HOA financial records under our own bylaws. She denied it. Claimed I no longer had standing. But she made a mistake, she sent the denial over email. That gave me a paper trail. Next, I contacted Greg, our former HOA treasurer. He resigned a month before I joined. Quiet guy. Kept to himself. But when I mentioned Hoa's name, there was a pause. A long one. She's doing it again, isn't she? He said. Turns out, he'd stepped down because Hoa refused to let him report expenditures directly to the board. Everything went through her. She'd submit invoices, he'd sign, but he never saw quotes or receipts. I started asking questions, he told me. And things got ugly. I asked if he had anything saved. He did. Backup copies of old reports, raw versions before Hoa's edits. Line items that were scrubbed clean before meetings. Thousands spent on consulting and maintenance, all paid to an LLC registered under a man named Minh Tran. Her brother. I had what I needed. Almost. I sent a letter to the board outlining what I'd found, attaching the documents. No response. So I printed them out. Every page. And handed them to neighbors at the Saturday farmers market. She was there, of course. Wearing white linen, sipping lavender lemonade. She didn't see me until it was too late. Her smile vanished when she saw the title. Where did our dues go? A community audit. That night, I got a call. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was her. "You think you know everything?" she said, voice low, shaky. "You don't know what you're playing with." Oh, but I did. And I was just getting started. After the budget expose at the farmer's market, I needed a new stage. The PTA was next. A school full of eager parents, ripe for influence. I applied for a volunteer position shadowing the treasurer. Hoa laughed when she saw me at the meeting, her eyes narrowing as she poured overpriced coffee into reusable cups. At the back of the gym, beneath fluorescent lights, I watched her work the room. She greeted every teacher by name. Complimented art projects. Politely steered conversations back to donations and upcoming fundraisers. Her smile was practiced, winning. She commanded loyalty in whispers and silent nods. I pretended to be enthused about bake sales and field trips, but my mind was elsewhere. I noticed discrepancies. A fundraiser titled Tech for All had raised $5,000, yet the list of purchases was empty. An overnight permission slip fee marked for library enhancements, with no librarian on record to approve it. And frequent small reimbursements to an entity called Bloom and Grow Events. During a lunch break, I slipped into the small office behind the gym. The PTA treasurer's desk was organized chaos, receipts stacked, papers pinned to a bulletin board. I copied every expense line I could see: blooms for HOA meetings, gift cards labeled Teacher Appreciation, catering invoices far above the PTA's budget. Back at home, I cross-referenced the Bloom and Grow LLC registration. It was owned by none other than Hoa's childhood friend, Lon and Gwyn. Of course. This was no accident. It was a network, silent allies funneling cash back into her sphere. At the next PTA meeting, Hoa announced a viral fundraiser on Facebook Live. She spoke of community spirit, of enriching young minds. Halfway through her speech, I interrupted, "We have clearance to audit these books, right? So why isn't any of our money actually going to the school?" Her facade cracked. She blinked. For a moment, the practiced mask dropped. Cameras panned. Her voice quivered, "This is preposterous." I held up my phone, showing transaction logs. "Care to explain, Ms. Tran? Or should I let our online audience decide?" Her gasp echoed across the gym. Teachers murmured. Parents pulled out phones. In minutes, the confrontation was streaming live, complete with captions and angry comments. Hoa's world tilted. I felt a rush, vindication. But I also sensed fear, the power of the faceless victim exposed. She glared at me. I glared back. The next chapter would be darker. But for now, the PTA had seen her true face. I watched the comments flood in. "Finally, she's exposed. Good riddance to the PTA tyrant. She ruined our children's trust." Each notification ping felt like a drumbeat in my chest, a reminder of every time she weaponized rules against innocent neighbors. In that moment, I realized this was more than justice, it was liberation. The live video racked up thousands of views. The principal sent a message, thanked me for my courage. I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing prepared me for the day Karen's ex-husband, Marcus, showed up at her front door. It was mid-afternoon, sun harsh on the porch. He stood there, leather bag in hand, shoulders tense, eyes scanning the manicured lawn. When I spotted him from across the street, my heart skipped, not out of sympathy, but curiosity. He knocked, once, then paused. Seconds stretched as Karen answered, hair in her signature tight bun, lips pressed thin. Their eyes met, thousands of words unspoken. He stepped inside. I crept closer, phone ready. Inside, I heard muffled voices. Her voice low, but not pleading. His voice sharp, laced with anger and regret. Through the window, I recorded every moment. I caught snippets. "You never let me have a chance. You changed overnight, took everything. I needed an apology. I don't owe you anything." Next, I saw him pull out dusty folders from his bag. Old photographs. documents. A divorce decree. Secrets filed under legal stamps. She froze when he waved a photo of a younger her, smiling with genuine warmth, gone now, replaced by that calculating glare. I watched Marcus thrust the papers at her, evidence of lies she'd hidden, bank accounts she'd fenced off from the settlement. A charity donation from her joint account that had vanished. Phone logs proving she'd lied about night runs for community safety. Her face paled. Pride cracked. She took the folder, fingers trembling. I zoomed in, catching the betrayal in her eyes. She was stripped of her composure for the first time. He turned to leave, but paused on the porch. "This isn't over," he said. And his tone promised more. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with her ghosts, and me. That night, I sat in my car, rewatching the footage. The X-Files were more explosive than any HOA audit. She had skeletons deeper than petty fines. And this was my turn to expose them. I uploaded the clip to the neighborhood group, anonymously. Comments exploded. "Her past is darker than we thought, no wonder she's so ruthless." Hoa's empire was teetering. Because when her own husband turned whistleblower, it proved she'd been hiding in plain sight. And I wasn't done unraveling her world. The next morning, notifications exploded, over 300 comments in an hour, neighbors horrified and outraged. Screenshots flew across my phone, some tagging local news. The clip was radioactive. I felt a thrill, but also a flicker of empathy. Divorce scars run deep, her betrayal had real consequences. That afternoon, she paced her driveway, phone clutched like a weapon, eyes burning with fury. I stepped forward, ignored by the crowd. "You think you've won?" she barked. My heart thundered. "This is far from over," I said. The silence that followed felt heavier than any fine she'd imposed. She retreated inside, door slamming behind her. I knew the game had escalated. This was no longer about HOA bylaws or PTA audits. This was personal. And deadly serious. Always. I didn't want to get involved in another disappearance. The last time, I told myself I wouldn't. It's never as simple as the news makes it out to be. But when I saw him, Lucas, the young kid who lived 3 houses down, sneaking out of his front door just before dusk, I should have known trouble was brewing. That evening, a police car cruised past my house, slow, deliberate. An officer was walking alongside the car, his gaze fixed on the darkening streets. I had no reason to panic. No real reason to pay attention. But then I saw his mother, Lucy, standing on the porch, her hands shaking as she wiped tears from her face. She wasn't just worried, she was terrified. Lucas had been acting strange for the past week, quiet, withdrawn, keeping to himself. His parents thought he was just going through a phase. That's what they told themselves. They were wrong. So was I. Because the next morning, it was official. Lucas was gone. The authorities canvassed the neighborhood. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I went about my day as usual, keeping my distance. But then, everything changed. I saw him. Out of the corner of my eye, Lucas, alive, well-fed, and looking perfectly calm, was walking toward the edge of the woods behind our block. Alone. His clothes were clean. He didn't look lost, confused, or scared. He looked free. I couldn't believe it. I had to be seeing things. He had been missing for over 24 hours, but there he was, alive, walking at a leisurely pace like nothing was wrong. I was frozen, staring from my window, unsure of what to do. My phone sat on the table, but I couldn't bring myself to call anyone. This didn't make sense. The situation didn't add up. But the longer I watched, the more unsettled I became. He disappeared into the trees, and I lost sight of him. I had to make a choice. The question kept circling my mind, should I say something? Would they believe me? Would Lucas even admit the truth if I did? I hesitated. That evening, I went over to Lucy's house. She was still pacing, face drawn, but when I told her I saw Lucas walking towards the woods, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and desperation. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm not sure. I don't know what happened. But I saw him. He looked fine. He didn't look lost at all." Her jaw clenched. "But why would he run away? What happened?" I couldn't answer. All I knew was that something was wrong, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know how deep it went. The following days were filled with tension. The search intensified, and Lucas's disappearance went from a missing persons case to a full-blown mystery. Yet, the longer it went on, the more unsettling the questions became. Why had Lucas been so calm? Why didn't he seem afraid? And why hadn't he come home? A week later, the truth hit me like a freight train. One night, Lucas's parents had gone out for dinner. Their neighbors said they saw a man, a stranger, standing near the edge of the woods. I couldn't believe it, the same man I had noticed on several occasions. He'd been lurking around, watching the families. Watching me. But I kept ignoring the oddities. It was the same man who'd been following me all those weeks ago, the one who had shown up on my doorstep at the worst time. A shadow, always lurking in the background. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place. There was no happy ending to this story. There was only a trail of lies and a family shattered. But there was more. Lucas had been hiding something, and I was about to discover what that was. The key was in his silence. And it was something I wasn't sure I could handle. The neighborhood barbecue was supposed to be a simple get-together, an opportunity to bring everyone together. But with Karen, nothing ever stayed simple for long. I remember the day clearly. The sun was shining too brightly, and the smell of grilled meat wafted through the air as families gathered under the tents, children running wild, parents chatting nervously over plastic cups of lemonade. But the mood was different that year. There was an unspoken tension between the residents. Many had heard the rumors about Karen's ex-husband, and more had begun to notice the cracks in her perfect facade. I had my suspicions, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Karen was standing by the grill, looking every bit the picture of suburban perfection. Her hair was perfectly done, and her smile never faltered, even as whispers buzzed around her. But I could see it in her eyes, the frustration, the simmering anger that was always just beneath the surface. Then it happened. Pastor James, the local leader everyone adored, wandered over to the grill to compliment her on the spread she'd set up. I could see the chemistry between them, the subtle flirtation that no one else seemed to notice. But I noticed. I had been watching Karen long enough to recognize when someone was hiding something. Before I could process the thought, Karen spoke. "I'm so glad you like it, James," she said in that saccharine sweet tone she used when she wanted something from people. She touched his arm in a way that made my stomach twist. Then, without warning, she raised her voice for the whole crowd to hear. "You know, it's funny how people can hide things so easily. Like a certain someone who thinks they can get away with affairs right under our noses." The crowd went silent, the clinking of cutlery and murmurs of conversation dying away. I looked around at the stunned faces of the neighbors, their mouths agape. Karen wasn't talking about her ex-husband this time. She was talking about Pastor James. The air thickened, heavy with disbelief. James turned red, stumbling over his words. "What are you talking about, Karen?" he asked, trying to laugh it off. "Oh, don't pretend like I don't know," Karen shot back, her voice dripping with venom. "I know all about your late-night rendezvous with Lucy from down the street. You didn't think I noticed when you were always sneaking away to her house? I saw you, Pastor. I saw everything." Everyone was watching now, too stunned to react. But I could see it in their eyes, the doubt, the realization that something was terribly wrong with their perfect little town. James stood there, his face pale. He was shaking, trying to regain some sense of control. "Karen, this isn't the time or place for..." "No," Karen cut him off, her voice suddenly cold. "It's the perfect time. Because I've had enough of the lies. And I'm done protecting anyone in this town. You think you can live your double life, hiding behind the pulpit, pretending to be perfect while you're cheating on your wife? Think again. And then it hit. The truth of the matter wasn't just about the affair. It was about Karen's need to expose everything, to tear down the walls of perfection and reveal the mess underneath. The hypocrisy. The lies. Pastor James made a hurried exit, but the damage was done. The barbecue was officially ruined. No one knew what to say. People slowly began to disperse, the mood dark and heavy, and the perfect picture of suburban life was shattered. But I didn't feel sorry for anyone. This was Karen's world. She had made her bed, and now, everyone would have to lie in it. She had ripped the fabric of this community wide open. And no one could pretend anymore that everything was just fine. As I walked away from the disaster, I caught Karen's eye. She gave me a small, satisfied smile, as though she had just won the battle of the century. But in truth, she had only begun the war. And this was only the beginning of the unraveling. The first time I glimpsed the wrought iron gate hidden behind tall hedges, I knew there was a secret. Ms. Tran's backyard looked immaculate from the street, manicured lawn, sculpted shrubs, and flower beds bursting with perfection. But a faint rusted hinge caught my eye when I trimmed the rose bush near the dividing fence. Heart racing, I slipped between the gap and pushed. The gate groaned, revealing an overgrown orchard shrub maze tangled with vines that looked almost unnatural. The air inside smelled of damp earth and something floral, but off, like petals decaying in shadows. I stepped forward, boots sinking into soft soil. Statues wore creeping moss, their faces eroded, impossible to read. A broken sundial lay overturned, numbers erased. Beyond, a greenhouse stood, its glass panes cracked and coated in grime. The door was ajar. Inside, abandoned planters held rotting roots. A scattering of strange, bell-shaped flowers drooped toward the floor. On a dusty bench, a journal lay open, yellowed pages filled with Ms. Tran's neat handwriting. I recognized her script immediately. My breath caught at the first entry, April 2nd, began testing new hybrids. The neighbors must never see. My pulse thundered. I flipped pages. Notes detailed botanical experiments, fast-growing vines, pollen engineered to cause allergic reactions, a resin that emitted irritants when heated. Her final line froze me, Project Serpenta, control through nature's gift. A sudden snap echoed behind me. I spun, nothing but shadows. My heart thundered. I tucked the journal under my arm and fled, closing the gate. My mind raced, why would Ms. Tran be cultivating bioweapons in her own yard? The whispers of danger I'd sensed had a face now, lethal petals in a secret garden. At home, I pored over the journal's drawings, thorned vines coiling around figures, annotations about dispersal mechanisms. This was beyond petty fines or PTA scandals. This was premeditated terror, hidden behind sunsets and tea parties. I knew I had to act. I took photographs of the entries, the broken sundial, and the cracked greenhouse. Neighbors might dismiss rumors of poison flowers. But the evidence couldn't lie. That night, as I lay awake, I imagined those vines slithering through air vents, creeping under front doors, striking when least expected. The secret garden was not a place of beauty. It was a battleground. And Ms. Tran, the gardener, held the seeds of our downfall. My phone buzzed. A notification from the neighborhood group, garden club meeting postponed indefinitely. I stared at the message, blood running cold. She'd found out I'd been snooping. Tomorrow, I'd have to choose, expose her to the police, or protect my family from the wrath of Project Serpenta. Either way, there was no turning back. Tomorrow dawned with a reckoning. Danger slithered. Whatever happened next would change Maple Grove forever. Serpenta's horrors were beginning to bloom. The morning they came for Karen, the whole neighborhood lined the sidewalks. No one said a word. We just watched as 2 squad cars pulled up in front of her house, lights flashing silently in the dawn haze. Karen stood on her porch in a silk robe, coffee cup trembling in her hand. She didn't resist when the officers cuffed her. She didn't even speak. But her eyes, God, her eyes burned with a fury so deep it chilled me to the bone. The charge was simple on paper, assault. The real story was anything but simple. It all started with a confrontation at Maple Grove's town hall. Karen had stormed into a closed HOA meeting, flinging evidence onto the long oak table, photos of secret payouts, screenshots of bribes, and yes, copies of Ms. Tran's horrifying journal about Project Serpenta. For a moment, the room had gone still, stunned. But instead of gratitude, Karen met rage. Power was too deeply rooted here. Ms. Tran, flanked by 2 board members, called her a liar. Accused her of fabricating everything. Karen's temper, always coiled tight beneath the surface, finally snapped. A glass of water hurled. Shouts. A broken nose. And by the end of it, a restraining order filed and criminal charges pending. The trial was swift. I sat in the second row of the packed courtroom, pulse hammering in my ears. Karen wore a plain navy suit, her hair tied back, no makeup. She looked smaller than usual but somehow fiercer. The prosecution painted her as a menace, an unstable woman seeking revenge after a string of personal failures. They paraded witnesses who spoke about her erratic behavior, paranoia, and need to cause chaos. I saw Karen flinch when they mentioned her lost custody battle, how the court deemed her unfit because of emotional instability. Her hands clenched into fists when they brought up her ex-husband's restraining order. But the defense fought back harder than I thought possible. They presented the evidence she had risked everything to expose, the shady financial records, the unethical experiments hidden behind garden gates, the whispered threats that had followed her every move. At one point, Karen locked eyes with me. And I realized something terrifying: she didn't expect to win. She knew the town had already convicted her in their hearts. It got worse. Under cross-examination, Karen's secret unraveled. She wasn't just Karen from Maple Grove. Her real name, hidden under layers of marriage licenses and address changes, was linked to another scandal across the country, an environmental whistleblower who had gone missing for 3 years before resurfacing here. The courtroom gasped. Karen didn't deny it. She just lifted her chin higher, daring anyone to call her a coward. The judge's ruling was brutal: guilty of assault, ordered to anger management, probation for 2 years. No jail time, but her reputation? Destroyed beyond repair. As she stood for sentencing, Karen spoke one last time, voice low but steady. You can silence me. You can paint me as the villain. But the truth is still out there. And when it blooms, when it swallows this town whole, you'll remember you were warned. No one clapped. No one cried. They just watched as Karen was led out of the courtroom, stripped of everything but her anger and her terrible, undeniable truth. Outside, Maple Grove returned to its manicured, silent perfection. But it was a lie. A rotting, poisoned lie. And deep down, we all knew, Karen was right. The reckoning hadn't ended. It had only just begun. Karen's house sat empty for weeks, blinds drawn tight like a wound refusing to heal. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid it. Children dared each other to run up to her porch and knock, but none had the courage. Even abandoned, her presence lingered, a ghost at the end of the cul-de-sac. And then, the news came. Karen had lost custody of her daughter. Permanently. Her little girl, bright, wild-haired, full of stubborn fire, was handed over to her ex-husband, a man who smiled like a politician and lied like a preacher. Karen didn't even fight it this time. She just signed the papers and disappeared from town records. I thought that was the end of her. I thought she was broken. I was wrong. The real storm began 2 weeks later. Emails started leaking, anonymous dumps sent to every HOA member, every parent at the school, every church elder in town. Secret minutes from meetings, bank statements, blurry photographs of clandestine rendezvous. Maple Grove's perfect mask cracked wide open. Ms. Tran's secret garden? Exposed. Turns out she wasn't just dabbling in botany, she was selling experimental seeds to biotech companies overseas, violating half a dozen international laws. Pastor James? Forced to resign after proof of financial embezzlement and moral failings came to light. The HOA president? Indicted for tax fraud and kickback schemes that stretched back a decade. Every ugly secret Karen had hinted at during her trial poured out like oil on water. The town panicked. Friendships crumbled. Marriages collapsed. Lawsuits sprang up like weeds after a rainstorm. I wish I could say I was surprised. But Karen had warned us. She hadn't just been angry, she had been right. One night, I found myself standing on the curb outside her house, staring at the dark windows. A rusted for sale sign swayed in the cold wind. I didn't know why I was there. Maybe to apologize. Maybe to say thank you. That's when I noticed it. A flash of movement inside. Someone was there. I took a step closer, heart hammering, and saw it, a figure standing in the living room, silhouetted against the broken blinds. A woman. Hair wild, shoulders squared. Watching. It was Karen. She hadn't run. She hadn't left town. She was still here, hidden in plain sight, watching as Maple Grove tore itself apart. Reckoning wasn't a sudden fire. It was a slow rot, seeping into the roots of everything we thought was safe. And Karen? She wasn't the villain anymore. She was the architect. The next morning, more files leaked. A drone video of the secret garden's greenhouse exploding into flames. Footage of town officials shredding documents in the dead of night. A recording of the school principal whispering threats into a phone call that was traced to a suspended judge. Everywhere, the same signature appeared. K. Neighbors began boarding up their windows. Some packed up and fled. Others stayed, too afraid to admit they were guilty too. The air in Maple Grove grew thick with dread. And at the center of it all, Karen stood silent, steady, unbreakable. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. Twisted, painful, inevitable. We had ignored her warnings. We had branded her crazy. Now, we were reaping what we had sown. And somehow, even though I knew I should hate her, I found myself rooting for her. Because for once, someone had finally told the truth, and refused to let it die. It arrived on a Thursday, tucked inside a plain envelope with no return address. Just a flash drive, cold and weightless in my palm. I should have thrown it away. I should have called someone. But deep down, I knew, it was from Karen. I waited until midnight to plug it into my laptop, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The screen flickered to life. Static first. Then a grainy image, Karen, sitting alone in what looked like the gutted remains of her living room. Walls stripped bare. Windows boarded up. The only light came from a flickering candle on the floor between her and the camera. She stared into the lens, unsmiling. "My name is Hoang Nguyen," she said. Her real name. Her true self. "You called me Karen. You turned me into your villain. But the truth never cared about your fears." Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with a kind of sadness I had never seen before, sharp, clean, and bottomless. "I gave you every chance to listen," she said. "I gave you every chance to change. You chose silence. You chose comfort. You chose lies." Behind her, something moved, a stack of files, paper-thin shadows, each labeled with a name I recognized, neighbors, officials, friends. Proof of everything she had uncovered, neatly catalogued and damning. "I was never your enemy," Karen said softly. "I was your mirror. You just hated what you saw." She reached for the candle, snuffing it out with her bare hand. Darkness swallowed the frame. Only her voice remained. "This town was built on rot. I didn't destroy Maple Grove. I just pulled back the curtain." Silence fell. Then a final sound, a match striking. The video ended. Shaking, I yanked out the flash drive. But it didn't matter. By morning, the footage had leaked everywhere: local news, online forums, even national headlines. Whistleblower exposes suburban corruption. Karen was right all along. The fallout was immediate. Investigations tore through every level of town governance. Schools shut down. Half the HOA board resigned in disgrace. Ms. Tran vanished without a trace. Bank accounts were frozen. Houses foreclosed. Maple Grove became a ghost town almost overnight. And Karen? She disappeared too. Some said she fled the country. Some said she changed her name again, melted into another faceless suburb, waiting to tear off another mask. A few even whispered she was dead, buried beneath the ruins she left behind. I don't believe that. Sometimes, late at night, I see movement at the edge of the woods. A flash of a dark coat. The glint of wild, defiant eyes. Karen isn't dead. She's just waiting. Because there are other towns like ours. Other lies. Other gardens rotting beneath perfect lawns. She's the storm you pretend you'll never see. The reckoning you pray will pass you by. But one day, when the wind shifts and the ground trembles under your feet, you'll know. Karen was never the problem. She was the warning. And this time, maybe you'll listen before it's too late.